I have finally completed the minion build that I wanted to make since Season 1 came out. I was having a lot of fun with Bone Spear and minions, but I was really waiting for the Ring of Meldon to drop, so that way I could finally build what I think is one of the most fun Necromancer builds in the game. Or at least, how a Necromancer should be. An actual god of the minions, or undead, or whatever you want to call it. Essentially, the new Malignant hearts in Season 1 allow us to really min-max this minion build, making it incredibly viable towards the end game. Unfortunately, you do need a unique to really take advantage of this build, but once you do, the survivability and damage output that this can have is absolutely amazing. There are a couple different ways to put this together. Essentially, this whole build revolves around the Ring of Meldon, as well as the new Malignant hearts. Now, there's a couple different ones that you can use for this. Right now, I'm using the Great Feast, which increases our damage per second with our minions by 91%, but it also drains our essence per second per minion, which means we're not actually going to be using any of our primary resource. We're going to be putting that all into our minions and allowing our minions to do all of our damage. You could also use the Barber with this. It's actually a really great option, but I haven't actually had another one drop, and I currently have one equipped into my Bone Spear necklace, but I have tested it with the minion build, and it is still pretty amazing. The other Malignant hearts that make this work is the Sacrilegious one, which allows us to, when we walk near a corpse, automatically activate an equipped corpse skill. So this is going to be Corpse Tendrils and Corpse Explosion. This is going to give us almost 100% uptime of Corpse Tendrils, as well as automatically proccing our corpse skills like Corpse Explosion and Corpse Tendrils while within Blood Mist, which is amazing. And then the other brutal heart we're going to be using is the one that allows us to, whenever we are near at least one enemy, we gain an aura that automatically curses surrounding enemies with Decrepify for 18 seconds. This is going to act as a crowd control for us, as well as a damage increase, and also will assist us in resetting our cooldowns extremely fast for almost 100% uptime of Bone Storm or Blood Mist. All of these things together allow for us to be incredibly survivable, and the way we start a fight is we activate Bone Storm, hit an enemy with Reap, activate Corpse Tendrils, and let our minions go to town. We're automatically going to be applying Corpse Explosion and Tendrils from here on out, and you can add more Corpse Explosions if you want for potentially more lucky hit procs to activate your Ring of Meldon. I don't know why I struggle to say that ring's name so bad. Essentially, this build has a ton of lucky hit on it, and all of the damage and shadow damage that we're applying are damage over time procs that also apply the lucky hit every time they hit. This allows our minions to proc the Ring of Meldon as much as possible and output a lot of damage. Meanwhile, during this entire time, we are incredibly tanky and or invincible, and it's just our job to maintain the battlefield, heal up our minions, and make sure we stay out of anything that could possibly kill us. And since we have so much damage going out all the time, as long as we have Decrepify on our enemies, we're going to be constantly resetting the cooldowns of our defensive skills, as well as Corpse Tendrils. So this is a really fun build to play, and I actually started using this before Season 1 to clear high Nightmare tier dungeons in the 70s and higher, which means right now using this build with the actual nerfs that they've done to Nightmare tier dungeons, you could easily clear up to 100s with this as long as you continue to min-max, increase your defenses, and make sure that you actually pay a little bit of attention and don't stand on the things that are going to one-shot you. Now let's focus on the legendary aspects and stats that we want to focus on for this build. For our helmet, I wanted cooldown reduction and lucky hit chance while you have a barrier. The other two stats that I would like to have is increased maximum health as well as increased armor. For our aspect, I'm using the skeletal mages is increased by 2. For our body piece, I went full-blown damage reduction as well as increased maximum life and summoning skill damage, which is our minion damage. For our aspect, I currently have the aspect of disobedience on here, although I'm debating because of where my armor is at the moment whether or not I should switch this to the basic skills, increase your damage reduction by 20%. There's actual tiers that you need to hit for your armor. It'll hit different levels of damage reduction, and when you're below about 8,000 armor, and with this I still will be under that 8,000 armor mark, you're only getting about 11% damage reduction. So the basic skill increasing your damage reduction by 20% is actually a lot better right now. That'll change as my armor goes up later into the game and as I progress through my Paragon board. But that's something to keep in mind. I just haven't gotten a good roll of that other aspect yet. For our gloves, I wanted critical strike chance. I would have also liked to have lucky hit. I just haven't had good luck on gloves. So I went with all stats and dexterity for more crit chance, as well as attack speed. pants, I also focused on damage reduction again, and I also have intelligence on here, although I would have liked to have increased armor instead. For our aspect, we have each time Bone Storm damages an enemy, you gain a barrier equal to 4% of your base life for 10 seconds. This is absolutely amazing, and a must-have for this build. For our boots, I wanted movement speed, ranks of corpse tendrils to reduce its cooldown. I also have dexterity on here for increased critical strike chance. The essence cost reduction is useless for this build. The boots really just focus on movement speed and corpse tendrils. The rest of the stats, you can be whatever you want. We also have Skeletal Warriors is increased by 2 here. I am using a one-handed sword. I wanted to make sure that I got vulnerability on here. Vulnerability is actually one of the only stats that your minions can get the full benefit of. Everything else is about 30%. So if you have a 100% critical strike damage, and your minions are going to get 30% of that, meaning they're going to have 30% increased critical strike damage. So on here I have all stats, vulnerable damage, critical strike damage, and damage to crowd-controlled enemies. This is pretty good. And this is also where I chose to put my Grasping Veins, so that way we get the 20% increased critical strike chance, as well as the 40% increased damage with corpse tendrils. For my offhand, I wanted to make sure I got maximum minion life on here, as well as cooldown reduction. We also have lucky hit chance while you have a barrier. So it's mainly just about cooldown reduction, lucky hit, and maximum minion life. We also have Bone Storm and Blood Wave are also darkness skills. You really need to get the Bone Storm to become a darkness skill. It's going to increase your damage reduction, as well as increase your damage over time procs, which will increase your lucky hit, which will hopefully get your minions to proc off the Ring of Meldon. You know. For one of my rings, we wanted to focus on critical strike chance, critical strike damage, and vulnerable if I could. Haven't gotten any good rings so far in the game. Also, haven't gotten a good Shadow Blight aspect yet. I would like to have the 120% increased damage one, but I only have 50%. Since we only have to hit enemies 10 times with this Shadow Blight key passive, and we have darkness skills going all the time, this is very easy to keep up 100% of the time. So having that 120% multiplicative damage increase is absolutely incredible. Now, obviously, we've already gone over the unique ring that we're using here. The heart that you can use in any of your rings or necklaces. The Wrathful Heart you use can either be the Great Feast for the increased minion damage or Barber. It's completely up to you. Both are incredibly viable for this build. Currently, I am using the minion one. I will probably switch it to Barber a little bit later in the game. Then for our necklace, I have mostly damage reduction as well as 3 ranks to Hellbent Commander on here, which is going to increase our minion damage by another 30%. Have intelligence on here, and the aspect I have on here I'll probably end up switching out. I'm not 100% sure if I like it or not. Feel free to leave comments down below what you would replace this one with. I've tested the Blood Mist one as well, which is going to increase our procs even more, so Blood Mist one is pretty good. I felt like the increased attack speed was not a bad choice either. But there's a couple of different options you can use here for your necklace. Honestly, what I would put on my necklace is the Shadow Blight one, so that way you can have even more Shadow Blight damage. And then I would replace the one on one of my other rings. This legendary aspect, this can go pretty much on any of your attack-based equipment pieces. Once I get a good Shadow Blight one, that's going to go on my necklace, and then I'll probably figure out what I want to replace it with, so feel free to leave some comments down below. For our Book of the Dead, I decided to go with Reapers, and we would definitely want to make sure that they are carving off corpses. We're going to need these. Mages, I am going with the Bone Mages. This is the most damage you can get out of them with the 40% increased damage. Will be a little bit more difficult to keep the maximum number of minions alive, but as long as you're forming corpses, you're respawning your mages every time they die anyway, so this is a really good option. I've actually chosen to sacrifice our golem for this. I really didn't want to take up another slot with our golem. It's up to you. You could go with a blood golem if you want, or really any of these. The golem can do a lot of damage. I just didn't want to put it on my bar. For our skills, we spec'd into Reap and then Acolyte's Reap, so that way our first hit will form the corpse. This is going to be useful for our corpse tendrils. Then 3 points into Hewed Flesh. I then have 1 point into Corpse Explosion and then Blighted Corpse Explosion, so that way it's now a darkness skill. I then have a Blood Mist and then down into the Ghastly Blood Mist, so that way we're still forming corpses. We're in this mode. I did put an extra point in here to reduce the cooldown a little bit more for some reason. You can put this point probably in a couple different places that we'll talk about here in a second. I do have Grim Harvest and 3 points into Fueled by Death. These are also ones that are potentially swappable as well. Then have 3 points into Death's Embrace. This is going to increase our close damage as well as our close damage reduction. This is mainly for the warriors that we're going to be using. I then also have Death's Reach, which is going to be more useful for increasing our mage's damage. Also have 3 points into Amplified Damage, that way when we have a cursed enemy, they're taking 12% more damage. which ties into our Decrepify, which we also have Abhorrent Decrepify, so that way we can reduce our cooldowns. We have 3 points into Skeletal Mage Mastery, as well as Skeletal Warrior Mastery. And I put 5 points into Corpse Tendrils with an extra 4 from our equipment. This is reducing the cooldown pretty substantially. And we also have Plague Corpse, that way we're getting the vulnerable status. Now, Necrotic Carapace is definitely one that you could use. There are points in this board that you can take out and put into this spot if you need more defense with Fortify. And then we have 3 points into Inspiring Leader, 3 into Hellbane Commander with 3 extra from our necklace, 3 into Death's Defense, and 3 into Bonded in Essence. These 2 you could potentially take out if you need to and put it into your Necrotic Carapace if you so desire. And then our final point is into Shadow Blight. Now we can go over the Paragon board. I will have stuff posted on Mobalytics for a full-blown guide on exactly what you need to do with the perfect stats as well as the best Paragon board. This is nowhere near maxed, but I wanted to start off with Control. This is usable in every build. It's a pretty substantial damage increase, so I highly recommend it. And the best spot for it is actually on the first board. So this is the Cult Leader board. I wanted to make sure just to get our first glyph in here with Dead Razor. This is going to increase our Overlord as well as the Custody for the damage reduction and damage increase. Now, the interesting thing about the Cult Leader board is all of this damage here, it's additive. So it's not multiplicative, so it's not a massive increase. But since this is probably the only area that you're going to get increased damage for your minions, other than maybe a little bit on your armor, it's pretty necessary for increasing your minion damage. Although if you start going all the way up to the tops here, like obviously we want to increase our skeletal mage damage as well, but it will become... but it's not as effective as if it was multiplicative. The second board I decided to go with was Flesh Eater, so that way every time we consume a corpse, we're dealing 40% more damage. This is multiplicative, it's really good. We can also get some increased critical strike damage here, as well as damage to elites. It's debatable if this is the best way to start, but so far this has given me a really good damage increase on our minions, and I really like the effects that we're having so far with this. But that does do it for the video. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and for a full written guide, make sure to check out the link in the description for Mobalytics, and I'll have it pinned to the top of the comments below.